The rain hammered against the towering glass windows of Sterling Industries as if the sky itself was weeping. Inside the luxurious top-floor office, Richard Sterling sat behind his mahogany desk, his eyes cold and calculating as he reviewed the quarterly reports that would determine the fate of hundreds of employees. He was a man who had built an empire on ruthless decisions and unwavering determination. At 52, he had everything money could buy, except the one thing he had lost years ago, his humanity. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, a knock on his door would shatter the carefully constructed walls around his heart in a way no business deal ever could. The door creaked open, and Richard looked up with irritation, ready to reprimand whoever dared to interrupt him without an appointment. But the words died on his lips. Standing in the doorway was not a business executive or a desperate employee, but a little girl, no more than 8 years old, drenched from the rain, her small frame trembling as water dripped from her worn-out clothes onto the polished marble floor. Her dark eyes, wide and filled with a mixture of fear and determination, met his, and in that moment, something inside Richard Sterling cracked. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, please hit that like button, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. The little girl clutched a crumpled envelope in her tiny hands, and as she took a hesitant step forward, Richard noticed her shoes were torn, barely holding together, leaving wet footprints that told a story of poverty he had long ago forgotten existed. She spoke in a voice so small it was almost swallowed by the sound of the rain against the windows. "Mom's sick, so I came instead," she said, her lips quivering. "She said you're the only one who can help us now. Please, sir. Please don't take our home away." Richard felt his chest tighten in a way it hadn't in decades. He recognized the envelope immediately. It was one of the countless eviction notices his company had sent out to clear land for a new development project. The Sterling Towers project was his most ambitious venture yet, a billion-dollar complex that would cement his legacy as one of the most successful developers in the country. But it required demolishing an entire neighborhood of old, rundown apartments where people like this little girl and her mother lived. To Richard, they had been nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet, obstacles to progress, collateral damage in the pursuit of greatness. But now, looking at this child standing before him, soaked and shivering, holding that notice as if it were a matter of life and death, which, he realized with growing discomfort, it probably was, Richard couldn't simply dismiss her as he had dismissed so many others. He gestured for her to come closer, and she did, each step small and uncertain, as if she were approaching a lion's den. When she reached his desk, she placed the envelope down with both hands, as if presenting something sacred, and then she looked up at him with eyes that held more wisdom and sorrow than any child should ever possess. "My mom tried to come, but she collapsed this morning," the little girl continued, her voice breaking. "The doctors say she needs treatment, but we don't have money for that. We don't have money for anything anymore since Dad died. This apartment is all we have left. It's where I remember my dad's voice, where Mom tucks me in at night, where I do my homework at the kitchen table he built with his own hands. If we lose it, we lose everything. Please, mister." "My mom said you're a powerful man. She said powerful men can choose to be kind or cruel. Which one are you?" The question struck Richard like a physical blow. Which one are you? It was such a simple question, the kind a child would ask without understanding the complexity of business and economics and progress. But it was also the most profound question anyone had asked him in years. Richard had spent decades convincing himself that ruthlessness was strength, that sentiment was weakness, that the ends always justified the means. He had built his fortune by making the hard decisions others couldn't make, by seeing opportunities where others saw human suffering. But sitting here now, looking at this child who had walked through a storm to plead for her home, Richard saw something he had tried to bury for so long. He saw himself. He saw the boy he had once been, the boy who had grown up in poverty, whose own mother had cleaned offices at night to keep a roof over their heads, whose father had died young from exhaustion and hopelessness. He saw the young Richard who had vowed to escape that life, to never be powerless again, to become so successful that no one could ever hurt him or take anything from him. But somewhere along the way, in his desperate climb to the top, he had become the very thing he had once feared and hated. He had become the powerful man who took homes from people, who put profit above people, who forgot that behind every number on a spreadsheet was a human being with dreams and fears and memories worth more than any building he could ever construct. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. The little girl wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Emma, sir. Emma Martinez. And your mother, what's her condition?" Richard asked, already reaching for his phone. Emma's face crumpled slightly. "The doctors say she has pneumonia, really bad. They want to keep her in the hospital, but we can't afford it. I've been taking care of her at home, but she's getting worse. This morning she couldn't even get out of bed. That's why I had to come. I didn't know what else to do." Richard felt something he hadn't felt in decades: shame, deep and burning. Here was a child, forced to carry the weight of adult responsibilities, trying to save her mother and her home while he sat in his tower making decisions that destroyed lives without a second thought. He stood up from his desk, walked around to where Emma stood, and did something that shocked even himself. He knelt down to her level, looking her directly in the eyes. "Emma," he said gently, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your mother is going to get the best medical care available. I'm going to make sure of that right now. And about your home, no one is going to take it away. You have my word." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief, and tears began streaming down her face. "Really?" she whispered. "You mean it?" Richard nodded, feeling his own eyes burning with unfamiliar moisture. "Really? I mean it." He picked up his phone and made a series of calls that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew him. He arranged for Emma's mother to be transferred to the finest private hospital in the city, with all expenses covered. He contacted his legal team and instructed them to halt all eviction proceedings in the neighborhood immediately. He told his project managers to find alternative locations for the Sterling Towers development, regardless of the cost or delay. And then he did something even more extraordinary. He asked Emma if she would let him drive her home and check on her mother personally. The drive through the rain-soaked streets was a journey Richard had never taken before, not physically, but emotionally. As Emma sat in the passenger seat of his luxury car, chattering nervously about her school and her mother and the small details of her life, Richard saw the city he thought he knew through entirely different eyes. He saw the struggling families in the buildings he had planned to demolish. He saw the small businesses that barely survived, the elderly couples who had lived in the same apartments for 40 years, the children who played in the narrow streets because they had nowhere else to go. He saw humanity in its rawest, most vulnerable form, and he understood with crystal clarity that he had been blind for far too long. When they arrived at Emma's apartment building, Richard was struck by how similar it looked to the one he had grown up in all those years ago. The same cracked walls, the same flickering lights in the hallway, the same sense of people doing their best with very little. Emma led him up 3 flights of stairs to a small apartment that was clean but sparse, with furniture that had seen better days and walls decorated with Emma's crayon drawings. On a worn couch lay a woman who looked far older than she probably was, her face pale and drawn, her breathing labored. When she saw Richard enter with her daughter, confusion and fear crossed her face. Emma ran to her mother's side. "Mama, it's okay. This is Mr. Sterling. He's going to help us. He promised." The woman, Maria Martinez, tried to sit up, tried to speak, but Richard gently stopped her. "Please, Mrs. Martinez, don't strain yourself. An ambulance is on its way to take you to St. Michael's Hospital. They're expecting you, and you'll receive the best care available. And about the eviction notice, please forget you ever received it. You and Emma will stay in your home for as long as you wish." Maria's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out with a trembling hand to grasp Richard's. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Richard felt his throat tighten as he looked at this woman who reminded him so much of his own mother, and at Emma, who was looking at him as if he were a hero when just hours ago he had been the villain in their story. "Because someone should have done it for my mother and me when I was Emma's age," he said quietly. "Because I forgot what it means to be human, and your daughter reminded me. Because it's never too late to choose kindness over cruelty." If this story has touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and let us know in the comments how stories like this impact you. Your engagement means the world to us. In the weeks that followed, Richard Sterling became a different man. He didn't just help Emma and Maria, he transformed his entire approach to business. He established a foundation to provide housing assistance and medical care to families facing eviction. He redirected millions of dollars from the Sterling Towers project into renovating existing buildings in struggling neighborhoods, creating affordable housing instead of luxury apartments. He met with the families his company had threatened to displace, listening to their stories, learning their names, seeing them as people rather than obstacles. His board of directors thought he had lost his mind, but Richard had never felt more sane, more purposeful, more alive. Before we conclude this story, I want to ask you something special. If you believe that one act of kindness can change the world, please comment below with a heart emoji and share a moment when someone's kindness changed your life. Emma's mother made a full recovery, and Richard became a regular visitor to their home, forming a bond with the little girl who had walked into his office on that rainy afternoon and changed everything. She reminded him of why he had started his journey to success in the first place, not to accumulate wealth and power for their own sake, but to make sure that no child would have to suffer the way he once had. He had lost sight of that purpose somewhere along the way, but Emma had helped him find it again. And in finding it, Richard discovered something more valuable than all his millions. He discovered that true success isn't measured by what you take from the world, but by what you give back, by the lives you touch, by the hearts you change, by the choice you make every single day to be kind rather than cruel, to see people rather than numbers, to build up rather than tear down. The rain had stopped by the time Richard left Emma's apartment that first evening, and as he walked back to his car, he looked up at the clearing sky and felt something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. Hope that it wasn't too late to make things right, hope that one person's change of heart could ripple outward and touch countless lives, hope that a little girl's courage and a powerful man's redemption could create something beautiful in a world that desperately needed more beauty. And as he drove away, Richard Sterling knew with absolute certainty that this was the most important deal he had ever made, the most significant decision of his entire career, the moment when he finally became the man he was always meant to be, not despite a child walking into his office but because of her.